So they just flew a nuclear-capable stealth bomber over Vladimir Putin's head. And everybody's just like, that happens every day. They just flew a nuclear-capable stealth bomber over the president of Russia's head. You could decode that messaging from space if you were an alien and you didn't speak the language and you didn't understand the culture. That is foreshadowing. That's a decapitation strike. Foreshadowing. You get me? We averted the near-term risk of nuclear crisis because Vladimir Putin is back in Russian airspace. His plane is about to land. But this is where things get very, very dangerous because now we've exhausted the final diplomatic lifeline that always gets exhausted before war. This is well historically precedented. Before every major conflict, there is a high-level summit, either between heads of state or high-level dignitaries. It happens with Hitler and Stalin. It happened with Chamberlain and Hitler. It happened with Khrushchev and Kennedy. It happened with Biden and Putin in 2021. Okay? In 2021, Putin and Biden were shaking hands, grinning ear to ear, extolling all kinds of flattery upon one another. And we all know what happened 8 months later. And I know there's going to be so many people mesmerized by the pomp and pageantry of what went on today. You need to ask yourself, why was that done at all? Because they could have had that 2.5-hour phone conversation, and they probably could have done it more efficiently, under the radar. They didn't have to attract all this attention. Well, I'm going to tell you why. You see, the most important points of today were right at the beginning and right at the end. Poetically bookended the entire circus. Okay? The beginning, when they flew the nuke plane over Vladimir Putin, that was so profoundly significant. And right at the end, when Vladimir Putin basically broke rank and he spoke in English for the first time of that trip. At least I'm sure he spoke in English to Trump in private when they were just having their one-on-one conversations, but to the press. And he did this on purpose because he knew it would catch Trump off guard. He said, "Next, we will welcome you to come to Moscow." And Trump, you could tell by his body language. I used to do research, myography research, where we would hook people's body up with electrodes and see if they're lying. Because there's these, very microsecond nerve reactions when a person is lying that are telltale signs that they're not being truthful. And Trump exhibited a lot of those things in that engagement. He immediately, ever so subtly, turns his back to Putin when he starts to respond, and his knee-jerk reaction was, I don't know, I'm going to have to talk to my people about that. And that basically tells you everything you need to know, that the U.S. does not trust the Russians. Okay? This is very important, because again, every single exchange like this in history is succeeded by a major conflict. And I have a feeling that things are about to get really, really ugly. Now, I think both of these guys are kind of slipping in their old age, because the flattery that Putin was exhibiting towards Trump was a little bit excessive, almost to the point of obsequious and servile to a degree. And these guys know how to read Putin now. Putin knows how to, dole out platitudes and things. Like he did it with Biden, okay, back in 2021. Back in 2021, people forget the meeting in Geneva, where Putin said that Biden was professional, constructive, experienced. He knows what he wants. He acts skillfully. He doesn't miss anything. This is Putin's forte, buttering people up. And what he's basically been able to achieve now, and this is very important, is that he's going to go back home to his people. And he's having now demonstrated the courage he did to come to the United States and face the music, this guy's going to go down in history with his people, man. Like, there's going to be all kinds of monuments to this guy. So whether you like him or not, okay? And here's what it is now provided him with: a blank check for full-blown war. No more special military operation after this, because he knows that Ukraine is likely going to reject the deal. And he knows that the war is going to intensify after this. And so now he has the mandate. Remember yesterday I talked about the three things that are most important when an attack is imminent. These three boxes will be checked. It will be militarily feasible, there will be an imperative to do so, and there's going to be a mandate. The only real muddy water here is the mandate aspect, which is what they're trying to postpone. Neither side wants a nuclear engagement, but they both know if they have to, they're going to try to do it swiftly. They're going to try to do a decapitation. And if you don't think, like, I know there's a lot of normalcy Normans in the comments section, do just wait to come on the channel and be like, see, nothing happened, right? It's like the most narrow-minded, shallow, non-contributing perspective, right? See, nothing happened. Well, actually, a lot happened. This is history in the making right here. And if you're a student of history, you know that this happens before every major war. The high-level officials meet. They burn the final diplomatic lifeline, like, you know, in that show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? They use their final lifeline. This is it. This is the diplomatic paradox, that once you use that card, that's it. That's the final bridge there is to burn. And it is unfortunate because I think that both of these guys find themselves in certain positions that they perhaps don't want to be in. But Putin can now go back to his people, hold his head high, and he just definitely went up in the polls there. Even if you say that the polls are rigged, the ones that aren't rigged, he went up in the polls with this. And now, if something bad happens, he's going to get a green light. You're going to have guys signing up left and right. Proud patriots. What did he do before he left? He went and laid flowers on the graves of American soldiers who died assisting the transit of the Lend-Lease corridor into Siberia, okay, back in World War II. I mean, so Trump got the win for MAGA, which, surprisingly, I learned today, support for the Ukraine war is now over 50% amongst Republicans. Isn't that interesting? It was 30% before, so they're following Trump into war, right? So he has the mandate now. But Putin got way more out of this, because he now has a green light. He's got a blank check. If they keep coming at him at this point, his people are going to be 100% behind him. So they kind of just screwed up. As much as they wanted to do that epic flex with all the F-35s that so clean and unused that you could eat off of them, never been properly tested against a peer, right? And this was all supposed to intimidate Vladimir Putin, who was completely unfazed by the whole thing, which is crazy. He just wasn't even, thinking about it. Maybe he looked at the stealth bomber and, people are like, oh, that's such a flex, bro. Well, he's probably thinking about, oh yeah, we got an S-500 that can knock that thing out of the sky. Right, we got your radar figured out, we figured it out in Iran or something like that, So, and I'm not saying that's technically the truth, but he was not fazed by it. Trump, on the other hand, you can tell Trump is usually very loquacious in these situations. He'll talk for hours on end, open to press conference, zero press conference, zero bold caps, ranting on Twitter, nothing like that. Very measured. And that makes me concerned, because that's how you know shit's actually getting real, right? When he seems like he's very trepidatious and far more circumspect than he usually would be in this case. And that worries me a lot, because this is when shit happens. It happens after this card gets played. Here's Putin's praise of Biden. People who portray Biden as frail or unfocused, this perspective has nothing to do or nothing in common with reality. They talk for 2 hours. Him and Biden talk for 2 hours. Okay? Face to face, one-on-one. Trump had a delegation, I think it was 3-on-3. Okay? And they had 2.5 hours. You factor in translation. With Biden and Putin, there'd be translation as well. So really it was 1 hour. But you have 6 guys, right, who are there to talk about economic issues and Ukraine. Obviously, it was just Ukraine for the most part. But let's presume maybe it was 50-50. Okay, so how much time was possibly spent on Ukraine there? About 1 hour and 15 minutes if you factor in the translation, because Witkoff doesn't speak Russian as far as I know. Maybe he speaks a little bit. They don't all speak good English and Russian. So you cut that 6 ways, and you basically got a few minutes for each of them to state their case. And that's it. And maybe the odd rebuttal. This was supposed to be a full day affair. This was supposed to be, as far as I know, like a 7-hour meeting with a lunch break. They didn't even make it 3 hours before the lunch break. And they cut the press conference off early. Okay? So despite Trump saying it was a 10 out of 10 meeting and all of this, that's what they're going to say. You know, people are like, you see, Putin said that the war would have never started if Trump was in office. What do you think he's going to say? Do you think he's going to come out and really, with everything that he is, blown up Trump's ego, he's going to take a big crap in the Sunday and be like, yeah, Trump backed out of the INF treaty and sent these Javelin missiles and did all this. You think he's going to say that? Of course not. He's going to tell you what you guys would get swindled. You few people who watch this channel. I know many people don't, except the normalcy Normans who are still in denial. But of course not. And of course Trump is going to say it was a 10. He's not going to say, oh, it's a 1 out of 10. It was a 7. It was a so-so meeting. This was it. This was the last thing, right? So the only question is, how do they paint Putin as a bad guy after this? Because it's going to be hard. I tell you, it's going to be difficult. Now, Trump did not blow Putin up too much. Like, he did not, talk him up that much. He talked him up a little bit, but not that much. So he's going to go to Zelensky now, and this is the stupid part. Trump, who has all the cards, has to go to Zelensky and see if he approves of the message. Why? You have all the cards. This is just total facade, and people are falling for it hook, line, and sinker, time and time again. And people wonder why nothing ever changes. People wonder why I'm so politically cynical. Because you fall for the same damn tricks every single time. Every time throughout history, this happens before a major war. This has to happen, right? Because you need to show your population that you did everything to try to bring peace. So I got a real bad feeling. And remember, when the first day Trump was elected, I made a joke. I believe you can go back, look through the archives on the Canadian Prepper channel. This one would be posted. I think I jokingly said, the war's over, But then I got real and I said, look, Trump and Putin are going to shake hands. They're going to do the photo op, and then things are going to escalate thereafter. Now, they actually escalated faster than I thought before the handshake. I mean, I never expected Trump to be doing all this zigzagging. Look, why would you perfectly time the flyover of a stealth bomber that you just tested in Iran against a near peer? Why would you do that if you weren't trying to be provocative, if you weren't trying to intimidate, okay? Everything about this, from, Trump waiting to get off the plane until the last minute because he thought Putin's plane, and if you guys don't think that there was a real security risk with Putin coming over here, the prime minister left the summit that he was at early, which was in, I can never pronounce the name, Kyrgyzstan? I'm probably not pronouncing the name of the country properly. It's one country that I've never understood anything about it, how to say it, and where it is. All right, it's just, even though it's a sizable country, I'm told. So he was there, and he flew back because of security reasons. Now, all of this that's telegraphed is for the purpose of putting the West on notice that if you try something, it's FAFO. So we already knew that they were on a high state of alert, but they need to make it obvious. But Putin's plane and the planes, the Russian Ilyushin planes that were flying in, were also exhibiting all kinds of subterfuge type behavior. Like they thought Putin's plane was arriving and then it was actually this other one. Now I'm sure Trump knew which plane he was on, but maybe the plane slowed down a little bit to make sure that they didn't get there until after Trump, because I think Trump was supposed to get there after and do this fashionably late thing where, you know, Putin is waiting in a very subordinate sort of way for Trump on the red carpet. But Trump, of course, Putin waited him out. And it was like the first, you know, blinking contest. And Trump blinked. Now, you would say it's customary for the host to come out and greet and to be there waiting in anticipation and accommodating to the guest. But it was so perfectly timed. Trump comes out of the plane, and then in 1.5 seconds later, Putin steps out. You know, Putin was thinking to himself, I'm going to wait until Trump gets off first. Because, for a variety of reasons, but, you know, if Putin were to get off first and be waiting, then that would be an embarrassing situation. And those are the power moves that, you know, Trump's the optics he tries to go for. But, yeah, that was when you knew this whole thing was just a gong show. They did roll out the red carpet, of course. Both sides are trying to play Mr. Nice Guy because they've caught on to Putin. Because Putin, I think he's getting up there too, and it's become obvious his strategy with these engagements. He really engages in excessive amounts of flattery, which it comes off as insincere at some point, even though he's very professional, very approachable, you know, very, you know, just warm and welcoming. But I think Trump sensed that something was off. Remember what Trump said. If there was no ceasefire, there's going to be severe consequences. Now they kicked the can down the road another 2-3 weeks, waiting for Ukraine's response, waiting to see if Zelensky, the guy he almost kicked out of the White House, approves the message, which makes zero sense. And if it makes zero sense, because it doesn't make sense. This is bad what happened today. This is exactly what I feared for the longest time. I said, after the meeting happens, that's when we enter into the scariest part of the day of this war cycle, because we've now burned that final diplomatic off-ramp. It's now become a bit of a cliff of sorts. And so if you use that final lifeline, so long as it's there, there's a bit of doubt as to whether or not war has to come. But now that we've done that, it removes all doubt. Now they can go on and they can have more of these talks, but just consider they could have had this talk over the phone. It could have been more productive. It could have been done in secret. Why didn't they have a press conference? What's the big secret in terms of the points of agreement and disagreement? All sides are going to know when they call the Europeans. It's not like, you know, are they worried that the whole thing's going to be blindsided by rogue elements that they can't control? Is it really that much of a security risk? I get they're not wanting to get ahead of themselves and not present something before, but I just cannot see the reasoning for not providing any specifics whatsoever, even with some of the lesser significant points on what they agreed on. They didn't give us anything here, and it's very uncharacteristic of Trump to not say anything at all, which tells you how serious this is. This is typically not a person who can contain himself when it comes to public speaking. Always long-winded and loquacious in his press briefings. And for some reason this time, very tight-lipped and overly circumspect. So I suspect that now that this symbolic Trump card has been burned, and look, did it have the effect that he wanted it to have? Maybe with his base. But if anything, what I'm reading on the internet is his base is liking the flex on Putin, right? They're liking seeing the F-35s. They're liking the show of power. And because the Republicans' attitudes towards the Ukraine war have become more supportive, that's a dangerous recipe because, like I said yesterday, they need the military feasibility, 3 things to go to war: military feasibility, imperative, and the mandate. Now they have all 3. Okay? Well, they don't all have, they have it by like 1%, but you could bolster that mandate. Arguably, feasibility, the most optimal time would have been today when they could have wiped out a significant portion of the Russian leadership. But, of course, they'd have to deal with incorrigible Medvedev, who's manning the nuclear controls at home, who is the next in line in most people's minds because Putin is the head of the National Security Council. Dmitry Medvedev is second in line. He's the deputy. So if anybody's going to push the button, it's going to be him. So I don't know. I mean, this just, it's hard when you're in there. Just imagine yourself in 1938 and you're, is it Neville Chamberlain, and you're visiting Hitler. And, you know, there's a summit and they agree we're not going to go to war and everything's going to be fine. Or maybe that we're not going to go to war, but it seemed like progress is being made. Imagine you're Kennedy and Khrushchev in 1961. And then, you know, things are going great. And then a year later, what happens? Well, shit starts hitting the fan in the East, in Vietnam, and the Cuban Missile Crisis thing, right? And so Saddam Hussein, I think he was in touch with high-level envoys prior to the Gulf War. You know, Witkoff in Iran, Stalin and Hitler, they had an agreement before Barbarossa. I mean, every single time. Biden, 21. I mean, that was just the classic case. Go back and look at the image of Joe Biden shaking Vladimir Putin's hand. And you don't tell me that you don't see that exact same look on Vladimir Putin's face today. That, my friends, is what's going on. The most important parts of that entire charade was beginning and the end. How poetic is that? The Genesis and the Revelation. Is it Genesis and Revelation? I can't remember. The first book and the last book. The bombers fly over Putin's head, symbolizing a decapitation strike on the Russian leadership. And in the end, Putin offers Trump to come to Moscow. And Trump, in a very unconscious, reflexive sort of way, turns his back and says, I'm going to have to ask my people about that. Dark days ahead.